Hello, my Kindred friends. This is Christian. Today I wanted to go over how do we make gifts really fast at this time of year. I'm going to do a video today that is focusing on one card design that can be used over and over again, especially when you're in a pinch. Using this design, I was able to make 5 cards in an hour and a half. I'm going to walk you through how I did that. Let's start by gathering the supplies that we're going to need for this card project. I am using the stamp set Mega Coworkers that has many images in it. This is because I want to be able to have all the images be a little bit different in my background and then have one image that is going to be forward facing. Because this stamp set is so large, I did cut it up to fit inside of my stamp envelope. The next thing that we're going to need is 5 card bases. I did top folding A2 card bases. I pre-cut these whenever I have a lack of mojo or I just don't feel like concentrating. We are also going to need 6 A2 card bases. These are 4¼ by 5½ sheets of smooth white cardstock. For the wise ones like me that remember what transparency sheets are, we're going to use one transparency sheet to make a jig so we can see where we will be aligning our images. Then I want a piece of glossy cardstock. I chose black for this one because it matched my design. You can use metallic, you can use whatever fits your card design. So let's break down some processes that are essential when you're working on mass production of cards. First up, do things in batches. Group similar things together so that you are able to do all those practices and processes all at one time, limiting the cleaning, which no one likes to do. And also, it helps you organize and prepare the assembly of your card. This again is something that you could do ahead of time when you're lacking some mojo or you're just sitting in front of the couch watching TV. This is a great way to be prepared and have everything ready so that you can throw together cards very fast and very simply. So let's just quick talk about what I'm doing. When you score a card, you are stretching the fibers of that card, and you're going to have a bump that shows up in the inside of the card. When you are folding your card, in order to get the best fold without a crack in it, is to hide that bump. So you're going to fold that bump in half, make sure it's kind of line up, and then you can put it into your scoring tool into the corner to help that stay nice and straight. I can't cut straight, I can't fold straight. So doing it this way has really helped me to ensure that my cards are at least a little bit straighter. It wouldn't be handmade if it wasn't crooked. Warp speed folding paper really fast. Now we're going to get prepared for the stamping. By doing our like things together, there's less chance of having extra ink go on to something that I don't want it on, and I'm able to clean my stamps at one time. So I'm going to take one piece of the card panels that we had pre-cut. So we have the 5 that we'll be using for our card bases and the one for stamping our main character who will be the focal point of the card itself. I will stamp this character 5 times on this sheet of paper. I do utilize my Misty for this since I'm not the best free range stamper using a block. I don't know, I struggle with that so hard. Shouldn't be that hard, but it is. So use the tools I have at hand, and that is what we will be doing. I placed the stamp in the top corner, inked it with some alcohol-friendly ink, and then I will stamp the image. Once that's completed, I rotate my paper. I want to be able to have the least amount of cleaning of my stamp as possible because I don't want to deal with the water or residue that's left on my stamp itself. Once the images have been stamped, I will then clean my stamp, rearrange the stamp on the piece of paper, and stamp it again. Rotate that paper one more time, stamp again, and then finally remove my stamp one last time, place it in the center, and stamp that image. When the stamping is complete, I'll go ahead and clean that up and get prepared to stamp now my sentiment onto the card base. Always confirm that you have your card base opening the correct way. You can ask me how I know. I bet you can figure it out. Maybe more than once I've done it upside down, backwards, or put it on there completely wrong. So always do that double check. The sentiment that I chose was, I'm glad you're my work friend, as this is a gift card set for one of my coworkers. Since this sentiment is long, I really want to make sure that it is straight-ish. To do so, I will use a grid, a transparency grid that I can use to see, does this stamp line up? So the first try, I line it up myself, trying to use the little etch lines inside my MISTI. I go ahead and I'll stamp that with some ink and I stamp it onto that transparency grid. You could also use the stamp backing from your stamp, that piece of acetate, that'll work well too. I can definitely tell that that is not in the correct spot. So I'm going to go ahead and try again. I'm going to line up my sentiment and put it onto one of the lines on the grid. I will test stamp that again and fail again. But now I know I just have to readjust my little part of friend to make it so it's a little bit straighter on the card itself. For the sentiment on this front panel, I am using a deep pigment ink so that I'll be able to have a nice crisp letters and you'll be able to see it and have the least amount of bleed when I'm restamping that. When all 5 of the card panels have had the image stamped on them, I will set them aside to dry. This is a pigment ink. If you do not let it dry and you touch it now, you may smear that and you'll have to do a new card design to hide that smear itself. If you needed to do this in a hurry, you could heat set your pigment ink. But I knew I still had my stamping and my ink blending and paper cutting, so I just let it be. Next, we're going to pull out that piece of transparency. This also can be a piece of acetate that you have in your stash someplace from some old packaging. We're going to cut this piece of acetate down into a 4¼ by 5½ sheet of paper, so an A2 panel. From this piece of acetate, we will be making a jig that can be used over and over again. And I apologize, I am off the screen, I didn't realize it. On the edges of the piece of acetate, I am placing a tick mark at the 1-inch line and then also placing a tick mark on the opposite side at 2 inches. This will allow me to have a slant that will fit on my card. I do write on the jig the measurements so that I can refer to this later. I also place a piece of washi tape on it after this video so that it doesn't get lost and it will be in my little templates folder. Putting one of my A2 panels that we had left over into the corner of my MISTI, I am able to see where my line of demarcation will be that I am cutting off. I will place my images throughout the card in all wonky positions. This will give the illusion that I used a pattern paper when I truly didn't. I soon realized that I didn't leave myself space to have a stamp hanging off of one edge of the card on that far right-hand side. So I pull in another jig to reposition my cardstock so that it will allow me to have the image go off of the piece of paper like you would see on pattern paper. With all my characters now in place, I was going to be able to start to stamp. When I pick up the stamps, my jig will also lift, and this is the jig that we made with the transparency. I'll just go ahead and peel that off and set it aside. Now I truly was ready to start stamping. You will notice the second jig that is holding my cardstock centered underneath my images remains in place. After each stamping of my design, I will replace that piece of cardstock into the same position. This will allow me to go through all 5 of those panels pretty quick. After a little cleanup, I was finally ready to do some ink blending. For this design, I will be bringing in the ink from the top left corner down towards the base. By utilizing this tone on tone coloring with an ombre effect, I am able to produce multiple cards at once without interruption. If you wanted to do multicolored, you sure can. Just know you have to clean up your glass top every single time. I chose not to waste all this ink that was hanging out on my glass top. This could be a great tag or background for another project. So I just spritz it up with some water, grab another A2 panel and dab it up. Why waste it? Plus, I don't get as much gunky gunk on my cleaning cloth that then stains my fingers and I make a mess with. With my mess cleaned up, I was able to go on to my A2 panels and just make little marks at the 1 inch on the left-hand side and 2 inch on the right-hand side. This is repeated on all 5 of the panels. I will then use these marks to cut off the piece of paper with my trimmer. Since I still had my trimmer out, I decided to cut out my black strips. These were cut at 1/4 inch intervals, giving me nice strips that I'll be able to use as a border on the base of my card. With all my other pieces ready, it was time to actually color my little images. Why I chose to only have to color one image was for efficiency. When I am coloring the stamped images, I like to do all the same colors at the same time. I also am not going above and beyond and making this a masterpiece, so my coloring is simpler. This takes the stress out of the coloring for me, knowing that I can do this in simpler terms and still have fantastic results. During this section of my coloring, you'll also see that I wrote the marker colors on a Post-it note for you to see. I did this because when I am doing this mass coloring, I don't want to keep taking my lid on and off of my marker. I am using an Olo marker, so the ink flows differently than if you were using a Copic or any other alcohol marker that uses a felt pad in the inside barrel that you use when you re-ink. I will play just a little music for the next few moments here while I finish up the coloring. I did want to leave all of this information inside of here so you could really see how it did only take me an hour and a half to make these cards, even though I did have to fast forward through many sections of it for you. Enjoy the music, and I will see you back at minute marker 16 or so. Welcome back. And just like that, we are done with the coloring and it's time to do some fussy cutting. I used a very simple fussy cutting technique where I left a little white border on it because I wanted the image to be able to stand out against the back of that blue ombre background. I wanted this guy to really be front and center and be the focal point of the image. With the fussy cutting complete and a quick visit from my fur baby, who has been very needy because daddy was out of town and he's a daddy's boy, not a mama's boy. So he was all up in my face. Once I got him situated and settled down again, it was time to actually start working on the assembly of the cards. Working in batches, I started to put the card together. First up, I wanted this card to be very male friendly, so I will only be using a foam tape on one of the images. I adhered our homemade pattern paper to the card base with some liquid adhesive. These were set aside to dry. Pulling out some foam tape, I started to do my assembly. When I am doing mass assembly, I cut my foam tape and put it on the back of some release paper from whatever I had used prior, so something that's non-stick, and I have it all cut up and ready to go. I chose to use the thicker foam tape widthwise so that I could adjust it to the needs that I needed for my images themselves without having to cut lots of little strips of something. I had it to the size that I needed. Prior to placing my colored image onto the card, I cut off the little black strips that were off to the sides. They had plenty of time to dry and set so that when I cut them, they would not wiggle around. Using a white gel pen, I added a little white highlight to the eye to make them sparkle, and then proceeded to place the foam taped images onto the cardstock. I do use reverse tweezers because I have big hands. They don't do well with little things, so they needed that extra guidance and help. I thought my card was done, but then I thought, well, you always need a little embellishment and a little bling. So I dug through my stash and added some black pearls to my card just to give it that little extra kick of a homemade card. With the embellishments in place, my 5 cards were done. 5 cards, hour and a half, including coloring. By having a simple template, limiting my color selection, using a design that can be mass produced and repeated over and over again allowed me to have a gift set in no time at all. I cannot wait to see what you make with the stamp sets that you have. 2 sets that I want to use is Crib Mates and Fruit Friends. They would be amazing in this technique. Share your creations with us over at the Kindred Stamps Fan Club out on Facebook. I would love to see what you're making. Until next time, my friends.